afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, excuse me, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Mobile Apps, How to Plan, Execute, and Launch, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. Please mark your calendars for the next webinar in our Digital Bootcamp series, Success Through E-Commerce, happening on November 18th, and I will drop that registration link in the chat momentarily. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the session. We have also enabled a live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's session, Cameron Nelson, CEO of Tenzing Startup Consultants. Cameron has over 20 years of experience in technology and as a senior tech consultant in Silicon Valley, helping Fortune 500 companies improve their digital marketing and e-commerce. At the same time, he also founded several tech companies, including a software as a service website for tree preservation and a blockchain platform for nonprofits. Cameron is accomplished in language, culture, has an MBA and MA. He believes new technology products have the ability to shape our world for the better. Please join me in welcoming Cameron Nelson.
Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the session on mobile apps. Today, we'll be talking about how do you plan out a mobile app for your business? What are the steps involved and what are your options? How do you then execute on your vision of creating a mobile app to support your business? And finally, what are the best processes for launching your app and making sure that is helping your business succeed and increasing your business's profits? So I look forward to presenting this information and also taking your questions at the end of the session. So if you do think of any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A box now or jot them down, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. So with that, let's jump right into it. The first thing that we should think about as a group is, should your business be considering to develop a mobile app in the first place? There's some real big pros to developing a mobile app, as well as some cons to that approach to increasing your business's revenue and profit. So let's talk through it. The first thing is the mobile app market, which is the apps that are available on the iOS store for Apple or the Android Play Store for Android phones, is a very crowded place. In the Apple Store, there's about 2.5 million apps, which generated over 100 billion in revenue in 2024. Whereas in the Android Store, there's 4.2 million apps that have generated about 55 billion revenue in 2024. So you can see here that the Apple Store has about half as many apps generating twice as much revenue. And you might wonder, well, why is this? And the trend is because Apple users tend to be of a higher income demographic, and they're just paying more money to buy apps for their devices. Now, whether or not your business is thinking about developing an app that'll just be something local in Virginia, nationwide, or even international, in 2024, apps globally on these two stores generated $935 billion. And things like the in-app purchases and advertising banners are some of the key drivers to that revenue. So now that you know how big this market opportunity is, let's dive into some of the specific advantages for launching an app on one of these stores. Firstly, as we discussed, mobile apps are used by billions of people around the world, and they're only growing in popularity. Mobile apps provide you with a great opportunity for engagement with your customers, and that's another funnel for customers to be able to find out about your business by searching on the app stores. They provide an increased opportunity for you to find your customers and increase sales. There's not just one way to create a mobile app for each platform. There's several different ways, which we'll be talking about. So you can find the way and the method that makes the most sense for you, for your budget, for your time, and for the app features that you want it to have. And once you launch an app in the App Store, your profit potential is quite high because you don't have a lot of overhead. So you can generate revenue very easily, and also a lot of that turns into pure profit. And this is as opposed to something like a brick and mortar store, which is going to have a lot more overhead that you have to support and maintain. So some of the cons or cautions are that it's a complex thing to do to build an app. There's a lot of variables, there's a lot of marketing tactics, and a lot you need to understand to get it right so you don't waste your money and your time in going down the wrong path. Secondly, unexpected issues can come up for first-time app creators. I do work with about 25 to 30 small businesses and entrepreneurs every year as they're developing mobile apps. And the first time, a first foray into this for most people is a bit bewildering because there's so much information and so many possibilities to make the wrong decisions. So the goal of this presentation today is to walk through a lot of those challenges so you have a better understanding. Another caution is if your app fails to come up with a new or innovative solution, you want to make sure that you're not just duplicating something that's already in the stores. And you want to make sure that you have enough funds and time, indeed, to finish your app fully and not leave it just a half-finished app that you can't really launch or monetize. And the last caution, which I added recently, is hiring the wrong development team. We're going to talk about how you can vet and verify the development team you're hiring is a good one for your needs. And so there's some good advantages and also some cautions here. So we'll go through the rest of the presentation, just keeping those in mind. So 2025 has been a year of a lot of changes in the landscape of apps, how they're effectively developed, how they're effectively monetized. So we're going to talk about some of these key trends. Firstly, free apps, meaning those that you don't have to buy up front, are 98% of app revenue on the stores. And these apps get their revenue through other means like in-app purchases, advertising banners, subscription models, and some others, which we'll be talking about more thoroughly. So you can see here that you really don't want to go in with a mentality of charging for your app up front, because in most cases, 98%, the app developers have decided to give their app away for free, at least in allowing certain features to be accessible at the free level. The second big trend is the rise of progressive web apps, PWAs. And what this means is it's an app that essentially wraps a website within it, and the website can look like it's running full screen. You don't see the browser in there, but you don't have to develop a whole new app. You can essentially develop a website or use an existing website for your app. And this is nice because it's a very cheap and quick way to launch an app on the app stores while not having to build a very complex infrastructure, the back end supporting it, or a complex new front end interface if you already have something existing on a website that pretty much fits your needs. Third, of course, is AI, which is cropping up in almost every realm of online technology and marketing. And there are now some AI tools that can help you to prototype and design apps. And we're going to talk about AI tools quite a bit because that is a huge trend in 2025 that's really shifted how small business owners like yourselves should be approaching developing an app. It's made the process significantly faster and cheaper in a lot of ways than it used to be. Fourth are revenue models that factor in microtransactions and subscription bundles tend to be outperforming other types of revenue models. So we'll talk about what these are more and if they're going to fit your business's needs. And lastly, the big trend is a low code or no code solution where small businesses are able to use a platform. I list a couple here, Bubble, Adalo, and Glide, to create apps essentially by dragging and dropping icons and making the app creation process a lot more intuitive and not having to code much or at all to get that app ready to be built. Now, there are, of course, some trade-offs with this approach. It's not going to give you as much flexibility or as much performance as a dedicated app development team, but low code and no code is becoming more and more popular in 2025. So let's talk a little bit more about AI. And AI in apps is definitely a trend that we're seeing accelerating throughout this year because AI, and specifically generative AI, which is the type that you might see in ChatGPT, allows you to build, market, and optimize your app faster. But usually, human oversight by a professional developer is still required in this year because the app coding isn't quite going to get you 100% of the way there. Maybe in 2026, you won't need to hire a development team anymore. That's certainly the shift that's happening. But I'm going to talk about four AI platforms and how they each can be used during this process, because I think it's important that you understand this trend pretty thoroughly. So, the first AI platform that's really helpful is ChatGPT. And of course, this can do a lot of different things for small business. And I have a whole presentation specifically on this topic, which we give a couple times a year. But when it comes to app development specifically, it can generate the app copy or what text you want the app to have on different screens. Also important in an app is coming up with an FAQ page or the frequently asked questions and the answers. So ChatGPT, if you feed it some information about your business, it can create the FAQs for you. You might want a chat bot within your app to essentially chat with a representative of your company, and you can train this on certain information. ChatGPT can help have this ChatGPT powered chat bot within your app. And lastly, ChatGPT can help you as you're thinking about designing an app. What's the flow like through the app? What screen leads to which screen? That's called the workflow. And ChatGPT can both come up with a text workflow or a graphical image workflow for your app, which is a great time saver and a great way to think about different app ideas before you spend money with a developer. So some of the pros with ChatGPT is it's great at understanding your natural language. You don't need to speak to it in any certain way. You can just say, "Hey, I'm a small business owner, and this is what I want you to do to help me develop an app." And we're going to give a demonstration of that on the next slide. Some of the cons are that it does require a paid plan to access some of its features. That starts at $20 a month. And you can run into the situation where if you're not getting the desired results, you might need to tinker a little bit with your prompts, and that's called prompt engineering. And just essentially learning a bit more about how to ask the AI to do specific things. The second AI system useful for building apps is called Gemini. Now, this is Google's competitor to ChatGPT. Similar to ChatGPT, it can also generate your app copy. This is one's particularly good at giving you summaries of your data. So if you have analytics about who's downloaded your app or even who's visited your existing website, and you want to use that data to build your app more intelligently, you can export a PDF or an Excel sheet and feed it into Gemini, and it can use that information, any kind of data you have, to help you develop your app. So some of the pros of Gemini is it's integrated very deeply with Google. So you can search your Google Drive, it can search your Google emails, and it can use information it finds there to help you plan and develop your app, which is really cool if you use Google a lot. And some of the cons is that to make use of this great feature, you need the workspace level account. Usually for a small business, this would mean you have an email address at your domain name that is hosted at Google. I'm sure some of you do already have this. About 50% of the businesses I meet with generally do have this set up where the Google is hosting their business email. And in which case, you're ready to go with Gemini. But if you're not at that level yet, you are locked out of using some of its more advanced features. The third great AI is called Claude. It was made by the company Anthropic, and this is a competitor to the two above. It's really good at drafting text. So if you want to draft a privacy policy for your app or a fair use policy or terms and conditions, this is a great AI platform to use. Also, it is neck and neck with ChatGPT as far as writing code. Now, as I mentioned, at this point in 2025, none of these are good enough to write a complete app code from start to finish and have it work flawlessly. They are approaching that level, and I do think we might see that in 2026. But right now, they can get you maybe 75 to 80% of the way there. Claude is really good at reviewing code and finding bugs, and so it can help you get you a good head start with developing a beta or an alpha version of your app if you want to tinker with it yourself before handing it off to a professional developer to finish. Some of the pros of Claude is that it has really good accuracy when analyzing lots of data and giving you long responses back. All three of these are getting better at that, but traditionally Claude has just been the best at these kind of long responses. So if you have something you need that's going to run multiple pages, Claude can be sometimes a bit better at that. Also, Claude has more of an ethical focus on AI, which might seem interesting, but there's a lot of discussion about ethics right now, and Claude really does try to make sure their AI is not going to tell you anything that's illegal, immoral, etc. So they do work on the ethic angle a lot. Some of the cons are that it has fewer integrations with third-party services than some of these others. For example, ChatGPT just this week integrated with Shopify, not Shopify, Spotify, the music streaming platform, to enable you to get insights from what you listen to in ChatGPT's responses. So that's kind of interesting. But Claude doesn't have those partnerships in place. So you won't be able to integrate. And like with Gemini, you can integrate with Google services, and Claude won't be able to do that. The last one on this list is an AI specifically made to help you code apps. It's a bit newer than these other three. These other three have been around for between 3 and 2 years, and this one is really only about a year old. It was designed to help you build no-code apps with AI. So you can just describe what you want and it can write the app. So the pros are that you don't need any coding experience, and you can also have fast deployment, meaning it can integrate with the app stores and help you launch those apps on the app stores quickly. But some of the cons are that it has more limited scalability. So you won't be able to build a very complex app using this platform, and the monthly fees can get quite expensive and quite steep. So if you have any other questions about these AI platforms or other AI platforms for helping you with your mobile apps, please let me know in the comments. But this was just a quick summary of the four major players here in this space. And I wanted to give you an example of what ChatGPT is capable of. So I gave it a quick prompt, which just said, create a workflow diagram image for a hypothetical app for a small business. Now, I didn't really say what the business did or anything like that, but I wanted to see how it can structure a workflow diagram, which is essentially the first step you'll need to brainstorm in creating an app. So I think it did a really good job here. It says a fresh cart, a local grocery app, and the goal is to help small grocers offer online ordering, delivery, and customer loyalty with a mobile app. So some of you might be in the grocery space, or at least this gives you an idea of what this can really quickly create for you. Now, keep in mind, it created this graphic by itself. I didn't have to reformat this at all. So the first thing is idea and research, and it identifies correctly the steps you'll need to take here. Secondly, you'll scope the app and build an MVP, and it gives some suggestions of platforms that can help with that, which are correct. Then you'll test and launch. You can do a closed beta, and it gives some suggestions about really what you're trying to accomplish in a beta test. Then you have maintenance and growth, marketing analytics, designing and building. So it's a great way to visualize an app. And if you just type in a prompt and give it more details about your business, it'll create a workflow diagram, can be an image, can be text points, whatever, bullet points, whatever you request, and it'll help you visualize this. And once you've gotten this done to a way that you're comfortable with, it's easy to show to developers, and it'll save a lot of time and money as they're now able to see exactly what your vision is and where they're going to deliver the most value. And it'll definitely speed up the app development process. So this is one example of one of these AIs in action, but all four of these have different capabilities. And I encourage you to see which one it makes the most sense for you to utilize as you work on developing your mobile app. So the next thing to discuss is what are the different stores out there for launching your app on? And along these with this conversation is what is the best development approach? So We probably all know that there's two main stores, the Android and the iOS store. The Android store globally has about 35 to 40% market share. The costs for developing here are moderate, and the development time is going to be moderate to high. The approval process means that once you submit an app, and they are going to make sure it doesn't have any viruses or bugs in it or malware, and they'll approve it on Android, that's pretty fast. Typically, just a couple of days. Or if they find something that needs more review, it can take up to a week. So Android's pros are that it offers very good performance with its apps and highly flexible. But because so many different companies make phones with the Android operating system, like Samsung, Google itself, Huawei, there's dozens of different companies, Motorola, how they implement Android can make certain apps break or function strangely. So they don't have control over the hardware like Apple does. But it's best if your business is targeting a broad user base, and especially if your demographics are skewed slightly towards middle or lower income groups, because that tends to have a higher percentage of Android use. So next up is iOS by Apple. They have 30 to 35% market share, and a huge percentage of teens in the US use this platform. It's just more popular with that group, whether not regarding their income. So teens from any income groups tend to be using iOS more. The development cost here can be high because the market here generates more revenue, so developers charge a bit more for their time developing for iOS. Development time is moderate, and the approval process is more strict and longer than Android. Now, I would say overall, the performance of iOS apps is better than Android, specifically because they also make the hardware that it runs on. So they have very fine-tuned performance, and you rarely see crashes or slowdowns, as you can sometimes see with Android apps. And like we said before, there's a higher income potential in here in the iOS store. Slightly higher development costs, though, starting out. And if you're aiming for a high income demographic in North America or a teen demographic in North America, iOS is a strong choice for you. The next option here is called Flutter. So Flutter is an example of a platform that will create both apps for you for Android and iOS simultaneously. Currently, Flutter and some of its competitors have a 20 to 25% market share, meaning 25% of apps are coded with a dual language and they're then launched on both stores simultaneously. So the development cost here is lower because you don't have to create two different apps, 30 to 40% lower if you're going to launch on both stores. Also, the development time frame can be up to 30% faster than writing what's called natively for Android and iOS. The pros are that it has one code base and it's faster to develop for. The cons are that if you are trying to use some advanced features of somebody's phone, like the accelerometer, the GPS, or something else, you could occasionally find performance glitches or other limitations with using advanced hardware or advanced coding. It's getting better every year, these approaches like Flutter, but it is not as seamless as the native approach to developing for Android or iOS. But this could be best for your business if you're looking for a very rapid and very low cost deployment across both of these stores. And the last one here is the progressive web apps, which I mentioned as a trend in 2025. This currently has around 10% market share. And like I said, what it does is it wraps a website in an app and makes the website go full screen on the phone. So it doesn't look like a website anymore if it's designed right, but it looks like it's a full mobile app. So the development cost here is definitely the lowest of all of these options because just building a simple website is usually much cheaper than building an app. So it leverages the existing web technologies. Development time here is very fast. It generally can bypass a lot of the App Store checks in the approval process because it's essentially just wrapping an external website. It doesn't have the pages and the content, the text and the images loaded into the app. It's going to the website for that. So the pros are that you can get around App Store fees in some cases and have a faster approval process. But if you're trying to use hardware things, again, like the GPS or accelerometer or any other fancy features in a phone, you'll have very limited means of using these using a progressive web app. This is best if you're very budget conscious or you're building a B2B solution and you just want to have an immediate reach, an immediate app you can launch, and you have already an existing website that pretty much fits what you want the app to be and what you want the app to do. So hopefully now you have an idea of if you would like to develop for Android, for iOS, using Flutter, which would be both, or going the route of a progressive web app for your mobile app for the business. So now that we've talked about some of the trends in 2025 and the latest and greatest technologies, I want to talk the rest of the presentation and cover the 8 subjects mentioned here. And these are the steps to successfully develop and launch your app. So the first one is going to be doing your market research. And each of these will get a deep dive. But at a high level, market research is thinking of who your target audience is when you're making your app. Because the usefulness of your app and therefore how much revenue it can generate from you is only really as valuable as the problem the app solves. Step number 2 in developing your app is scoping the app. Many times I find this is the most common problem with entrepreneurs or small business owners where they don't have a great scope of the app and additional features kind of creep in over time when they're working on the app, which leads to both delays and cost overruns. So it's really important to really identify the critical features and then the nice to have features and be clear in your mind what those are. And if you're not sure, it's a good time to survey your target market, do some phone calls, do some interviews, maybe send out emails and gather data and say, are these features that you need this app to have if you're going to be using it? And don't just go for with your hunch on this, but actually get some hard data. Once you've developed and built the scope of the app, you'll have then your minimum viable product for the app ready to go, and that's been then defined in the scope. Step number 3 is finding a developer and setting your budget. You always want to shop for at least 2 or 3 different quotes from different developers and also compare local Virginia-based developers with offshore options. And I'll be talking more about how you think about local versus offshore in a moment. Read a lot of reviews and look at apps and preferably use some of the apps they've made. Make sure they're quality apps. If you are looking at a developer and you notice the app is broken or has a ton of bad reviews, just definitely pass on that developer. There's a lot of developers out there, and I'll be telling you how to find the right ones. Step number 4 is thinking about the business plan for your app. So you obviously have a business plan for your business already, but work in how much you should invest of your business's revenues and profits into developing this app and figure out what is your expected return on this investment. You got to think of an app as just another extension of your business. And then decide what are the features and functions you should offer to really maximize your return on investment. And this is a good time to go back to step number 2 and scope out those critical features and nice to have features. You don't want to spend too much money on the app building in a lot of nice to have features if they're not directly going to help your ROI for this app. And of course, as part of this, determine your revenue models. We'll be talking about the most common and successful revenue models in a few more slides. Step number 5 is doing your marketing research. In this step, you want to determine who are your target customers, what are their personas like when they shop using an app or when they're going to spend money using your app. Determine their needs and their wants. Now, you probably know a lot of this from your existing business, but when it comes to an app audience, it might be slightly different. So think about your target customers and those who are going to be using your app. Step number 6 is building a prototype of your app also called an MVP, a minimum viable product. You'll work with a developer here, and you'll then have time to incorporate user feedback. Once you had some time to incorporate user feedback and fix any bugs, you'll then be able to launch your app. And there's a couple ways to launch in a beta test, a closed beta test and an open beta test, and I'll be describing the differences of those. And lastly is promoting your app. So you've got a beautiful app, it works. How do you get it into the hands of your target market? How does it start generating revenue and profits for your business? And there's a few ways you can be doing this by using social media effectively, paid ads, in-person events, and converting leads into paying customers. So let's start talking about step one, market research. And one quote I like that summarizes this well is find a big problem that's just going to get worse and fix it. Because every app in the App Store essentially solves a problem. You know, if it's a gaming app, the problem is boredom. If it's a cooking app, the problem is not being inspired or not knowing how to cook and needing those recipes. So whatever your app is, it's solving a problem. And so you might not be at the stage yet where you know what that problem is, and that's okay. So there's 4 steps here in conducting your market research to help you identify that. The first one are interviews. Just speak to people who you think are your target market and ask them what kind of app they would use and get data on their needs, their wants, and their problems and how you can solve them. One thing that's good to keep in mind here is to keep a narrow focus on the questions you ask. Because if you end up with just too much information, it'll be very unfocused and hard for you to act on. Step number 3 is staying organized. I like to use a form to collect data. You can either enter the data yourself as you conduct a phone interview or after you just talk to somebody on the street and you gathered some data, or you can even send these out over email and see if people will fill them in themselves. Here are links to a couple that I like to use, which are Typeform, SurveyMonkey, or Google Forms. They're very easy ways to build a form. They'll collect your data and show you charts and graphs and show you what the data is telling you. And step number 4 is don't forget to say thanks because a lot of the people who you interview early on might become early adopters. And if they like your app, they might share it. And this is a great way to grow your app user base. So you always want to stay in touch, keep a spreadsheet, the names, the time you talk to them, their contact information, and keep them in the loop as you develop your app. And they might like to test for you and give you further feedback. And it can be really invaluable as you build up your app. There's a few other tools which are helpful, especially when you're doing some analysis of your data. Of course, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, they're great at doing analytics. There's a few specific tools that can be useful if you want to do a more deeper dive into the data you collect from surveys. Qualtrics XM, SurveyMonkey, and Google Analytics 4 are all great tools for analyzing your data. So now that you've completed step 1, let's say, and you've got some great data on the app and you have a pretty clear idea of what problem it's going to solve, you're now going to think about how to scope your app and make sure you're getting those critical features separated from the nice to have ones, and then how you're going to go about making a minimum viable product. The reason why minimum viable product is an important concept is because it makes sure you don't spend more money and time unnecessarily developing an app, and you might find out at the end of that journey that the app's not being used or it's not useful. So take, for example, the 2 pyramids. The pyramid on the left is an example of somebody building an app. And what they're doing here is they're building about 10% of the functionality of the app. They're forgetting to make it reliable, so maybe it crashes or bugs out a lot. Forgetting to make it usable, so maybe it doesn't have a good user interface or it's just not intuitive. And they're forgetting to make some emotional design aspects, making sure it connects to solve that problem. So that's not the way to develop an MVP. Rather, what you want to do is take a thin slice of all of these elements, make it slightly functional, slightly reliable, slightly usable, and a slight element of the emotional design. With about 10% of the money, you can make a functioning app that you can then iterate on and test. And this is the idea of an MVP. And this is why the industry has turned to MVPs in large part over the last 5 or 10 years. The benefits are you focus on building the core app first, gives you an early testing opportunity. You can gather feedback and learn how users interact with the app. It gives you quick market validation. So maybe the problem you're trying to solve wasn't as big as you thought, and you pivot. This is a good time to pivot once you've just made a little bit of the app and at much less cost and time to develop an MVP versus the entire pyramid without really testing the theory that it'll work. I also like this example of an MVP. So up here is someone who's trying to build a car. And this is how not to build a minimum viable product, whether it's a physical product or indeed an app. You don't want to start with one wheel and make two wheels, and then make something like a skateboard, then half a car, then a full car. Rather, the minimum viable product that I'm trying to illustrate here is at the bottom, you're still starting with a functional product, aren't you? You're still starting with something like a skateboard, even though you're still trying to get to a car. But a skateboard turns into a scooter, to a bicycle, to a motorcycle, to a car. And the key difference here is even on step one, you're able to functionally use that product. So think about your MVP journey in such a way that you're just going to add additional quality of life features until you've gotten to your end goal. But this approach allows you to test and iterate and make sure you end up on the right product rather than the top example, which you could spend a lot of time and money getting to the same place and even fail trying to get there. Step number 3 in creating your mobile app is selecting the best developer. There's two main options here. We're Virginia-based small businesses and entrepreneurs, so of course there's local Virginia-based developers. There's also offshore developers who are primarily in India, China, and Eastern Europe. So some of the pros and the cons for each of these approaches. The quality of the app, from my experience, is going to be generally the same. That's because writing app code is very mathematical, and people who are in India, China, or Europe can write these mathematical formulas just as well as people in the US. So the quality of the finished app is often very, very similar. The communication, however, with US-based developers is always going to be superior because they're native English speakers first. They're in the same culture, so they just kind of understand cultural nuances better when you're trying to communicate. And they're also in the same time zones. So offshore, of course, communication can still work, and time zones are usually overcomable by early morning meetings or late evening meetings, but there will be more communication challenges. Also, because of language and English proficiency can be hit or miss depending on your team. So you want to very carefully vet them and talk to them ahead of time and make sure you can communicate well. The third factor is time. The speed of getting an app developed is going to be very similar between US and offshore. When it comes to cost, however, offshore options are significantly cheaper. Currently in the US, expect to spend about $125 to $150 per hour for a professional freelance developer or small development team. And you can compare that to about $30 to $40 an hour for, say, an Indian-based development team. So they come in at around 25% of the cost of a US developer. And the last factor is the long-term commitment. So many app developers want to make sure their development team will be around in a month or in a year if they want to make updates or fix bugs that they found. And the good news is both of these scenarios, these developers like to be long-term partners, so they'll readily be available for you to update the app in the future. Now, this is a very important thing to consider is what is your app revenue model going to be? There's 6 main revenue models, and I'm going to walk through kind of what makes each of them work and also some of the considerations if you're going to use them. The first app revenue model is in-app advertising. And the pro here is it can make your app free to use because you will set a place in the app, usually at the top or the bottom, to display a banner. And that banner is just dynamically set by an ad agency. And whenever somebody clicks on that, you get a little bit of money. Usually it's about a penny. So with thousands and thousands of users, some will click on those and you'll make some money. The con though is overusing ads and banners can annoy users. So you don't want to lean on that too heavily. The next revenue model is in-app purchases. Now, these are good because they can make your app free to use, but you can unlock certain features with an in-app purchase. Both app stores will currently charge you about 30% of all of your revenue made by in-app purchases as a fee. So just something to keep in mind. Now, similar to in-app purchases, you can have a bundled purchase or bundled subscriptions. And in this case, you might say, upgrade and unlock all the features of the app all at once. And by bundling it, you save them, 20% or 40%. This model works pretty well, but it's not really suitable for all types of apps. And it really depends on your business model if you can employ this revenue or not. The freemium revenue model is similar to what we saw before, that about 98% of apps are free. So they're completely free. There's no barrier for a new user to come and try out your app, but you will have to determine what features to have behind a paywall. So they will have to pay to get the pro version of the app, and that will unlock certain features, but it can be really hard to tell what to give away for free and what to charge money for. So to learn that information, you can do surveys and collect additional data. The next option are paid apps, which you have to pay money upfront before you can download. Only about 2% of apps in the stores are a paid app. The advantage is it's very predictable revenue. You're going to earn it in advance. So if you can get away with charging people up front, it's kind of the ideal revenue model for business because you're just immediately getting that cash. You will be paying 30% of this fee to the app stores, so keep that in mind. And because there's such strong competition, you might have other similar apps that might be free, and people might be choosing those over yours if you charge too much money up front to buy your app. And the last type of revenue model is dynamic transactions, dynamic microtransactions. So the app stores will use an AI to kind of automatically adjust the price of things in your app based on the user's engagement and spending patterns. And this is relatively new as of this year. So a casual user might see a lower price or a special offer to encourage them to sign up for a trial. And after the trial, they start paying. Whereas a highly engaged user might receive a more expensive premium offer. So you kind of have to see how this would work for your business model and see how comfortable you are with it because the revenue is not quite as predictable. And also some feelings of users, they might feel like they're being exploited if they see one person paid less for the same thing. So 6 different revenue models. You can definitely mix and match or use multiple models, but you want to come in with a clear strategy of what's going to work best with your target market. And again, doing those surveys and collecting data can be really useful in determining what users are willing to pay for your app and where they're willing to pay for it, either in the app or upfront or to get an in-app purchase. So step number 5 is how do you market your app? So you're at the point now where you've founded the development team, you're identifying your core app functions, and you really need to know how to market it now. Now, there's 3 key steps to keep in mind when marketing your app. The first one is to identify your target customers, and also, if you can, build out what's called buyer personas. Now, the AIs like ChatGPT are really helpful now in building your buyer personas. If you have some survey data or just general data about who your target buyers are, you can feed that into ChatGPT and say, build me buyer personas that'll help me market my app to these people. And it will do that. It will segment the groups into different buyer personas, and it'll tell you this group likes to be messaged in this way. These kind of words, these kind of feelings and emotions, and this other group likes to be messaged to in this way. So, step number one is thinking through your groups and thinking through how they like to receive information and what makes them decide to buy an app and to start using an app. Step number two is to determine your customers' wants and needs. Again, what's that pain point that you're solving? You'll need to formulate your marketing message, hopefully based on the buyer personas you've identified earlier. And you can even run your messaging by some potential customers who you trust their feedback and you value their opinion and say, hey, look, is this kind of striking you as authentic, as genuine? Is it interesting? Or is this a turnoff? And listen to what they say and refine your message. And step number three is using this information to build your final marketing strategy to reach your customers. Now we have a couple different ways to market within the App Store. The first one is called App Store Optimizations. And this is similar to, if you have a website, search engine optimization. And it's using the right keywords in the app to help it rank higher in the research results. So just like with a website, if somebody searches for maybe um, homemade sourdough bagels, Arlington, Virginia, you want your bagel business to show up high in the website search results. Similarly, with App Store optimization, you'll show up higher in those search results. So AI can help you work on this, as well as hiring professional marketing firms that have done this for a long time to help you optimize your search results. Second tip is don't forget about influencer marketing. So you might have influencers in your industry that would be willing to mention your app, that it's coming out and talk about what it does, or maybe even do a little live video of them using the app. That kind of stuff can be really useful for you as a small business owner to get the app promoted and get it out there, get it used. And the third tip is here's a way you can, if you can use user generated content by encouraging users to create or share content that promotes the app. So, one good example of this is the company GoPro that makes the action cameras. Now, their whole marketing for 10 years or so has been built on taking user submissions of doing fun and exciting sports stuff or adventure stuff using GoPro cameras and turning those into little commercials. So they just rely completely on user generated content and it worked very, very well for them. So think about how you can incorporate some sort of user generated content into your marketing cycle. And it should help you both create the content, but really connect with your target market. Now that you've thought about your target market, how you're going to message to them, it's time to build a prototype in step number 6. So, similar to the AI example I showed before of creating kind of that flow of the app, a prototype is a more advanced version of that where you'll generally create a very quick and easy clickable means of interacting with the app. And this will just be a way for you to both send it out to people and get their feedback and also test it yourself and make sure there's nothing that seems odd or not clear when somebody would be using your app. This is a step that happens right before the app is developed. So it's important to have thought through this very carefully so you don't spend unnecessary time and money redoing the app. Like with every part of this process, it's important not just to use your gut instinct, but to gather feedback. So it's nice to use some of these tools. I list a couple here, Just in Mind or Mockflow. And it's something you can do yourself or your development team can do for you. And you can then get a link to send out the prototype of your app. And you can then ask for feedback from people. So a few different ways that you can incorporate user feedback is if you have an existing business website, you can mention that people can try the prototype of the app and you can put that in a blog post or put that on your business website somewhere. You can also reach the community of your target buyer, usually in someplace like Discord, Slack, or Reddit. And you can post app and your app prototype there and ask for some feedback. You can also conduct short surveys and ask about specific things about the prototype people liked or don't liked. Again, you want to be specific in your data collection, otherwise you'll end up with too much unstructured feedback and it won't really be useful. And if you have any business social media pages or even personal social media pages, you could post your prototype there. Usually, it's a link you can post, and people can then tell you their feedback, express their feelings. And Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are all great places to post that and solicit that kind of feedback on your prototype. So now that you've gotten a lot of feedback on your prototype, you're going to work with your development team and build out that MVP. Usually, once the MVP is done, you'll want to conduct a beta test. And this is really one of the last steps before you launch your app to the public in the app stores. In this phase, the users and the testers will report bugs and suggest additional features they think make the app more useful. And these are good things to incorporate in your final version if possible. So it's good that you've saved some time and hopefully budget at the end because you might not have thought of some of their pieces of feedback. So there's two different types of beta tests you can do. There's a closed beta test and an open beta test. In a closed beta test, you'll send out a link to download and test the app to a very small private group of people who you know personally, and you'll be soliciting their feedback directly and listening to them, maybe observing them use the app or just seeing what their experience is like. The goal is to make sure your app is ready to be used by everybody. And if your private beta testers are having some problem or difficulty, then it's probably guaranteed that the wider audience and the wider world would have a similar issue. So it's a good time to fix things and solve little problems. Alternatively, you can do an open beta test where you will post your app and the download link to actually use the app on a phone to a wider group of people, usually anybody who's interested in testing it for you. This is particularly useful if you're part of an industry that's kind of close knit. So, going back to the bakery example, maybe you know a dozen bakeries in the Arlington area, and you say, "Hey, I have a new bakery app. Can your staff try it for the next couple of weeks and give me some feedback?" So that'd be a open beta test. It's a wider group. You don't really have control over who tests the app, but it serves the purposes of demonstrating your app idea to potential users, but also getting the feedback and finding errors that haven't been found before. So, whether or not you do a closed beta or an open beta is up to you, but certainly some type of beta test is an essential step before you put the final polish on the app and launch it in the app stores. So after you've done a beta, you're then going to work with your developers and really put the final touches on the app. Sometimes the beta or the MVP is very, very close to being done, but other times you can find it has a long way to go and you spend additional weeks or months working on it. Once it's done, you're launching the app on the store, and now you're at the point where you're going to promote the app. So I want to talk about the primary promotion tactics to really then get the word out there that your app is available and make sure it generates the most amount of revenue for your business. The first thing I would say is you definitely want to have a website that goes along with your app. Now, if you have an existing business website already, and that can serve the purpose of letting people know your app is available. You can have a download link to the app on your website. That's fine. Other cases, you might want to build a separate website for the app, or if your business website isn't modern enough or really capable of promoting the app website, you might decide to build a separate website for the app and just make sure it has a high level of, professionalism and quality. The next promotion tactic will be to talk about it on social media. Just organic posts or those free posts on places like Facebook, X, and Instagram can go a long way in spreading the word about a new app. You can have screenshots of the app, or if you have some user submitted content, maybe somebody using the app, that's great. You can share those types of videos or pictures on social media, of course, with that person's permission. It's also a good idea to follow people in your industry to grow your social media reach. Now, this is just kind of common marketing tactics for any type of business, not app specific. But if you have influencers, you can follow them. They might see that you've launched a new app, they might use it, and this kind of thing can really snowball and help you get a lot of app users quickly. You can also consider paid ads on major platforms like Facebook, X, or Instagram. And of course, these will be a budget item. You'll have to have a budget for this, usually between $200 a month and on up, even up to $500 a month. But they can be very effective platforms for advertising a new app. You can have a link to download the app right there in the ad, so people can jump right to it and hopefully start using it. The third tactic is public relations. I know a lot of small businesses, if they have a brick and mortar store, who will kind of host a little event or a little launch party. And as part of that, will say, hey, we've got this app. You can have a QR code on the door as people come in, they can scan it, and that can be a download link to the app right away. You can conduct interviews with local papers or a tech or a blog that's an influencer in your industry. And you could even have blogs on your own website about it. So you want to write content and get the word out. And lastly, if you have a contact with an influencer or some sort of celebrity in your industry, using them to promote your app is a very powerful way. So if you have any connections, then you can talk to them about your app and helping them maybe do a short review or talk about that it's available. And again, the focus here is that they're going to talk about how this app is solving a problem. So you might want to give them some speaking points and kind of make sure what they're going to say helps you check that box and get the point across that the app is solving a problem for your target market. Now, one thing I want to talk about briefly is what about data security and privacy? And this is applicable for any kind of business that has online infrastructure, whether it's a website and whether it's a mobile app. So, why does data security matter when you're developing a mobile app? Because we've all seen apps that have been hacked or the user information has been leaked, and it definitely hurts user trust. Also, with legal compliance, there's more and more regulations about user data and privacy, such as in Europe and North America. There can be fines or legal consequences if you don't follow data security practices. And what's been happening more in the last year or two is that hacking groups are holding data for ransom and demanding payment. The average was $4.45 million per incident, and they're demanding that as a ransom to give the data back to the business. So I'm not sure any of your businesses are at that size yet where a hacker would care, but you want to kind of plan for the future here. You don't want to you want to make sure you're not a victim of a hack that exposes your user data. So what are some of the means you can use to secure the data in your app? And these are at a very high level. Of course, you'll want to talk to this with your app development team, and depending on the specific features of your app, make sure you're following their recommendations as well, which might be in addition to these. The first one is to encrypt your sensitive user data. So any passwords, any personal information. Standard here is AES 256, and that should be sufficient, but it might not be something your developers are thinking of. So you want to make sure they're going to think of encrypting the data. Secondly, is making sure when a user creates their logins that they have things like secure authentication. It can be multi-factor authentication, where it will text them a number they have to enter to start using the app or every month. Just a best practice nowadays. I know some of us would probably find this slightly annoying to have to go through this process, but right now it's one of the best ways to make sure one of your users doesn't let their password be stolen and hacked, and then they could, come to you saying that the app wasn't secure. So multi-factor authentication is one prevention for that. And the last thing is just don't collect more data than you need. So some companies like Facebook are known for just collecting all sorts of data on their users, and they sell that data and they make a profit off of it. But for you as a business owner, you have access to collect a lot of data from your app users, but you should ask yourself only what do you really need to be collecting? Because one, your users don't like to share more than they need to. And two, if you did have a data leak, you could then confidently say, look, we didn't have your social security number, so that wasn't taken. We didn't have your addresses, so that wasn't taken. So only collect the data that you really do need. And every 6 to 12 months, review your app's data collection practices and policies to make sure you're really only collecting the data you do need. And that if you're collecting it, you're encrypting it and using other safeguards, like we mentioned here, to make sure it's going to be safe. With that, that summarizes the body of the presentation. And now I'd be happy to take your questions about mobile app development and see if I can answer all of them for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron. We have a couple questions that have popped in, so I will also ask if anyone else has questions, go ahead and drop them into the Q&A so that we can pick Cameron's brain while we have him here live with us. So let's see. This question, could you use a model where the advertising is on the app, but the procurement is via SMS, thereby bypassing the App Store 30% charge?
I do get asked quite a lot of questions of how do you bypass the 30% charge. Your method of, and I'm not sure I completely understand how you would charge money, but I heard SMS, so that would be a text message. I will say this, that the app stores get more and more sophisticated with people trying to bypass paying that, and they'll usually warn an app developer once and say, look, we feel like you're violating our our fees, but sometimes they won't even warn you. And what they can do then is they can ban your developer account, which costs about $100 a year to set that up, and they can also remove your app. So I don't really have enough information to like give you definitive guidance. I would just say be careful because I have seen apps in the store being creative with how they collect fees and then getting banned. So it's a real painful thing when you've spent a lot of money making your app. And I know the fee can be quite steep, but generally speaking, it's better just to play by the rules, is my advice. If you do have more questions, and maybe I misunderstood slightly, but if you do have more questions, it's probably a good thing that we could talk about even offline because I'll probably need a lot more information. So if you wanted to follow up, you could email the address here on the screen, which is help@virginiasbdc.org, and just let us know that you came to the meeting today and that you had this follow-up question, and I'd be happy to look into that more for you.
Thanks, Cameron. Let's see, another question. Please provide some budgetary figures for the end-to-end cost of a typical app development.
That's another excellent question. So what is the total cost? It's hard to say exactly because some apps are very simple and some apps are very complicated and they can be 100 times the cost of a simple app. But let's just say you have a simple app in mind. It's got 4 or 5 screens. It has a couple of basic features, a user login, a couple of things it does. Generally, a very simple app like this, if you develop it in the US, you'll end up paying around $4,000 for a simple app. And that will include, the wireframes and the mock-ups and the prototype and helping you launch it in the stores. So if you do a little bit of that work yourself with AI, let's say you come up with the wireframes, you come up with the flow chart, and that'll save you some money. But if you decide to go with an offshore developer to make a similar app, it'll cost you probably about $1,000 to $1,500. So again, it's about 25% of the cost of a US developer by going through a company that might be based in India, as they're just much more cost effective for development.
Okay, let's see. Can you describe 5 typical mistakes or errors in app development and deployment?
Yes, definitely. I think I touched on the main ones just throughout this presentation. Picking the wrong developer team is a big one. Not scoping the app properly. So feeling like you've got 20 features and they've all got to be in the app. It's not creating an MVP. And most of the time that gets you into trouble because it ends up costing too much money. So scoping is important. The development team is important. Picking the right platform. You have Android, you have iOS. You need to decide which one of those will be your primary target. And for that, you need to do market research. And I would say a fourth one is just not doing sufficient market research. So I think that shouldn't be ignored. go ahead and focus on collecting data from users and doing the market research. So I know that was four. There's probably more smaller, minor ones, but for me, those are the four big ones that are the most problematic that I see.
And we actually have an SBDC advisor on here that has offered up another offshore option for app development is in Latin America, where the costs are lower and you're still in the same time zone. Do we have any other questions out there? We still have some time with Cameron. Let's see. Okay, so we have an attendee who runs a home health agency, and you've intrigued her interest in getting an app for her company. What would be the first step?
It's a great question. So the first step is thinking about what problem you're going to solve. I mentioned this problem thing, but every app, if you think about it, really does solve a problem, as is almost every product out there. So you have an existing business and you want to make an app. So I would think about how does the app directly contribute to solving a problem? And then, what do the app features need to be like? What does the app need to do functionally? If you'd like to, brainstorm some of this, you can go to AI. If you use ChatGPT, you can give it some information and say, hey, what are some ideas for this app? Also, if you'd like some further talking one-on-one with me, if you want to email us at this address, I'd be happy to kind of bounce some ideas off you and give you some feedback about what direction you're thinking about going in. But it's just all about right now thinking and gathering data. And before you spend money on any certain path, you want to make sure that it's a path that has a high chance of success.
We have another question. Do you have recommended approaches or sources for finding a US-based app developer? This attendee is not sure where to start.
Yeah. So we're probably in Virginia. So there's a lot that are in Virginia. I specifically know some developers that are in Central Virginia around Charlottesville and Richmond, who I primarily work with. So I can give some recommendations if you'd like to follow up and email the address here. I can send you those directly. But I do work with some here and who have gotten very high reviews from SBDC clients in the past. So I'd be happy to evaluate your needs and try to fit you in with the best developer that I know.
Great. Okay, any other questions out there? Yeah, I'm going to put this, the help email in again for everyone to reach out. If you have questions or follow up with Cameron, or even just like to book a session with an SBDC advisor. All right, I might put up last call. Oh, we have let's see. Okay, so here's someone who's like developer. So yeah, if you all can send them an email to help@virginiasbdc.org, I can get you all in contact with Cameron. So, all right, do we have any other questions? And while we are waiting, Cameron, do you have last words of wisdom?
No, I think the questions so far have been great. It's about the first step. It's about the cost. Of course, these are pressing concerns for everybody thinking about doing this, especially for the first time. I encourage you to, look at your options. You can get in touch with us. You can also look if you're wanting to find other developers. You can look on Upwork or Fiverr, which are good freelance platforms, and kind of get several different quotes. And do your research. Talk to some SBDC advisors before you make a decision. Just kind of really be sure that the app is right for you, that the path you want to go down is the right path, and we'd be happy to guide you along that.
Great. Cameron, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who joined us today and remind you that you are going to receive an email with a link to this recording and to the slides. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or get in contact with Cameron, I'm sorry, I'm combining two things right now. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. And then if you would like to get in contact with your SBDC advisors or with Cameron, help@virginiasbdc.org. You can also sign up for a session with an SBDC advisor through our website. And just remind you that these webinars are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. And we hope to see you all at our next session. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.